Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be doing some investigation into the engine from our 1960 Bolens Ride-a-matic, and we'll see how far we get and what we can find. Since the last video, we've done a couple of jobs that we said we would do off camera on previous things that we've kind of worked on but didn't quite get around to doing finishing touches to. Now, in a previous video when we reassembled the Rideamatic, we said we were waiting for a clevis pin and it arrived, so we fitted that up and it is literally the perfect size now to go on there. There's absolutely no movement in that point, so we are very happy with that, and it looks decent too. The other one, we did find a bit of steering wear, or a bit of wear in the steering system, which, seeing as we've rebuilt most of it, was a bit disappointing. And that wear was in the quadrant hole there, which this kind of bar part goes onto. So to fix this, we drilled out that hole and put a bronze bushing in there, and that took out pretty much all of the wear. Now, if I move this side to side, if you look just at the steering wheel, it looks like that there's still a decent amount of wear. However, if you go around to each of the track rod ends, you can see each of them has a tiny bit of movement before they actually move the stub axle. That's pretty much how those work. When they're kind of bolted in at an angle, they want to be able to move a bit. So I think we're calling that as good as it gets, and even with that tiny bit of movement on the steering wheel, you can see the wheels are still moving slightly either way. So we're calling that as good as we can get it there, and we are very happy with that. It's not enough wear to notice it as you're using it, and it's still nice and smooth, not too tight. And much better than when we found it, where you could do a quarter turn of the steering wheel. The front axle would be moving forwards and backwards an inch either side. So we're happy with those jobs that we've done. But now on to today's job, which is looking at the Kohler K161 that came out of this tractor. When we found this tractor, the engine didn't actually have a spark plug in it. We just put this one in here to stop any dirt getting in the engine. And as you can see, there's absolutely no compression on that whatsoever, which could be down to a number of things. Now, if we look at the ID plate there, it does have the right spec number and stuff. So this is the right, or the original engine, we are led to believe, and it does have original paint on there. However, there is some darker paint on there, which might suggest that someone's tried to repaint it in the past. Who knows? But the first things we're going to try and check is the ignition system. So we have our spark tester wired up here, and we'll see if this has a spark. Highly unlikely that it will, but we'll see anyway. So I'm going to give this a pull. Let us know if you see a spark. No. Okay, so as we said, as expected with that there isn't a spark. So what we're going to do now is pull the points cover off and give those a clean, with the aim of hopefully getting a spark before we dismantle everything, in the hopes that we don't have to buy a new coil. So we cleaned the points and checked the gap, and that is as it should be, which I think is a good sign of past maintenance, maybe, that isn't in too bad of condition. However, when we pulled it, there still wasn't any spark, so we think we're looking at a new coil there, which is a bit of a setback, but probably what should be expected is having to put quite a few new parts on this. But now what we're going to do is take all of the tin work off, which got various bolt points there, got another one there, and then kind of around the bottom of the front engine casing. All of those need to come out, and they all look quite crusty. So we're going to do this off camera, so we can do it as slow as we like, so that we don't snap any bolts, because that would be a major setback. And we'll come back to you hopefully in a minute with all of those bits of tin plating off and hopefully no snapped bolts. You join us back having just taken off all of the engine cowling, and none of the bolts were badly seized or snapped. There were a couple that were quite tight, but some releasing agent got those going quite quickly. Now onto the things that we've noticed. This head bolt here is very loose. We haven't even touched that, which means it's either snapped or just not done up. But by the looks of it, that tightens up all the way, so it should work still as functioned. But when we take all of those out, we'll have a look down there, see if it is snapped or if it was just left loose. And if it was just left loose, then there might be some warping on the head because of that. Another thing we noticed is that some of these head bolts have different sized heads on them. Hopefully that's how they're designed, but we'll check that out in a bit. Another thing, you can see the part of the backing plate that cracked off here. We had noticed this before, and it's quite an old brake, as you can see by the kind of cracked edge. It's not shiny or anything, so it happened quite a while ago. And you can see from the inside of the engine cowling that big dent that we're going to have to knock out of there when we get towards the end of this engine rebuild. And the usual 3-course meal in the bottom of the engine cowling, just with no rodents or other animals to evict, which is quite good. Now what we're going to do is take all of these head bolts off, hopefully without snapping any, and see what lies below. Hopefully we will find a stuck exhaust valve, because that would probably be the easiest solution to fix for the no compression issue. And in a perfect world, we'd see a nice clean bore with no lips, but still having the honing marks on there. So we'll see if that's what we find, but what we'll do now is take all these bolts off camera, and we'll do the big reveal with you in a second. We have all of the nuts and bolts off of the head except one now, which I was going to do the last one on video as part of the reveal. Now we did have a bit of trouble with the nuts on the 2 studs. We put a 1/2-inch spanner on there, it wouldn't really fit on there, and then when we tried 9/16, so one step up, it was too big, so we went for the metric size in between, which was 13, and that kind of worked enough to get those off. And we have just tried putting a new 5/16 nut on there, and it worked fine, so we're definitely going to replace those nuts when it comes to fixing this back up again. So I will take this last one off now. There we are. Get the washer with it. And we are reusing this kind of stud pattern diagram thing that we made for the Raider, I think it was, or something like that, but we've edited it with this C showing where the carburetor is, because there isn't really a point where you can go to the top or T on there as it shows on box. But now for big reveal, see how easily this comes off. There we are.
Turn the engine over to see if that valve is stuck.
Yeah, that is a stuck exhaust valve.
What does the bore look like?
It's
hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah, the top part looks like it's got a bit of rust on it, which is definitely not ideal. We took the gasket off here now, and we've done a bit more inspection. When we say that's a stuck valve, that very much is stuck, so I'm sure that's going to be fun to get unstuck. But then having another look at the bore, there are a few scratch marks, but when you run your finger over them, they don't actually, you can't feel them, so it's just visual. The bore feels pretty smooth, even with some of the rust marks further down, they feel smooth as well, so we think that's in relatively good condition and could definitely be much worse. There's obviously a lot of carbon on all of the parts there, including in the head, so that's going to need some cleaning up, which we will do now. And then after that, we'll look at taking off the carburetor so that we can get to the valve cover, pull that off and see what we could do about unsticking that valve. We've cleaned up the head now. As you can see, it looks better than it did. However, it has uncovered a couple of things. Firstly, the exhaust valve is in very bad shape by the looks of it, which is unfortunate. And if we turn our attention to the top of the piston, there aren't any markings on it, which usually we would expect to see a marking indicating whether it's the original piston or an oversized one, if it was oversized by what amount, but there's nothing on there. And we would also expect to see an arrow pointing towards the front of the engine, but that isn't on there either, which is surprising. So what we're going to move on to now is taking off the carburetor and the valve cover. There's 2 bolts for the carburetor, 1 on each side, and these screw bolts, so you can put a screwdriver on them as well. Hang on, that's the wrong way. And then there's 1 bolt for the valve cover underneath here. So what I will do is finish taking these off camera now, and we'll come back to you in a second to open up the valve cover. As you can see, we've now got the carburetor and the valve cover off there, and we've done a bit of tinkering with the exhaust valve such that that now moves, and if I turn this around, it will go back up, as you can see. So that is free now. We're happy with that for our investigation, that issue can be sorted effectively, which is all we wanted to get for now. In the not too distant future, we'll need to take these valves out and check the valve guides, the condition of those, and the valves themselves on the long parts of them. But seeing as we're just doing investigation today, we're going to move on to the flywheel area, see if we can pull this off and get to the coil and other ignition stuff underneath. There we are. That's the nut off the end of the crankshaft here. I'll just get the spring washer off too. Not sure if this stuff's going to come off easily, but it's worth a try, isn't it? Oh, there we are. That's the front pulley off. That's good. And the flywheel, I'm not sure if I should be extra optimistic and try and pull that by hand, but there's no chance that's ever going to work. So I'm guessing we should crack out a puller and be back to you in a second. We now have a puller set up on the flywheel, and we're not sure how this is going to go. Hopefully it should pop off without too much resistance, but if it doesn't, we'll have to tap it a bit to help it come off. But I'm not sure how well this is going to go, so I'm going to go slowly. There we are. That popped it off nicely. I'll just take the puller off with the flywheel. There we are. And there's the usual muck behind the flywheel, but we can see the coil and everything behind it. We've had quite a big cleanup now, and we found on this tractor that even though you might clean something a couple of times, you'll still find muck on it, because this engine and the tractor as a whole was absolutely filthy. But with stuff more uncovered, you can see the coil and how badly cracked it is. From some research that we've just done quickly, we think this is a Bendix coil, and apparently it's a common issue for the epoxy covering to crack, as it has on this one. However, we are struggling to find a replacement for that at the moment. We haven't done too much research, so we need to do some more, but that looks like it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Now, there's plenty of stuff that we need to do on this engine now, to do with research, taking measurements for things, seeing what parts are available and what we could get hold of. So that's what we're now going to do off camera. We have recorded this a number of weeks in advance because we thought we'd hit some snags with unforeseen problems or parts ordering. So although this is pre-recorded and hopefully we will have moved forward by the time this goes out, or this video goes out, we would still welcome your thoughts as to what we're doing here with this engine. But we will now get to researching some parts and taking some measurements for things off camera. But that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.